And so it's really great because the episodes they all feel of a piece, but they all have like a little special extra sauce in them. And it's totally the writer. And I think as the writers on staff appreciate it because so much of what ends up on TV is their work. It's all them. Like you can feel it. And so I think it makes them more invested in the show. And the short answer is just get amazing writers. That's the best way to do it.
Hey folks, Brian Smith here with Dream Path Podcast, where we get inside the heads of talented creatives from all over the world. Today we talk to Kourtney Kang. Kourtney is a writer and producer. She is also the creator and showrunner of Doogie Kamealohas MD for Disney+. Now, as the name suggests, this is a reboot or reimagining of the hit 80s and 90s series Doogie Howser MD, starring Neil Patrick Harris. However, Doogie Kamealohas MD is set in and shot in Hawaii. Also, the main character is a mixed-race 16-year-old girl, so it's pretty far afield from the original, and therefore I would call it more of a reimagining as opposed to a reboot, which is a good thing. Also, Kourtney really made this show her own, made it very personal to her. She based the characters on her own family. She based a lot of the themes on her own experiences being born in Hawaii and having family there. And it's a lot of fun. It has themes for all ages, and it's a great show to watch with your kids and teenagers. I watched the first 8 episodes. The last of the 10-episode season premieres tonight, November 10th. And I think we'll find out pretty soon whether it gets picked up for a second season. And I think things are looking pretty good based upon the rave reviews that this show has received. Now, during this interview, we talk a lot about Kourtney's trajectory into film and television and how she made her way into the industry. She gives advice to aspiring television writers. She talks about her time working on How I Met Your Mother. She was on that show for 9 seasons, all 9 seasons. And the last few years of that run, she was the executive producer of one of the biggest hits in primetime history. She was also on Fresh Off the Boat. She worked there for several years and also worked on a Netflix show called Pretty Smart. So she has a lot of street cred going in. She knows television and comedy inside and out. And therefore, she has a lot of wisdom to impart for folks who want to learn more about this industry or possibly even get their feet wet in this industry. Kourtney was very generous to share her story with us, and I hope you enjoy this chat as much as I did. So let's jump into my chat with the immensely talented Kourtney Kang. Thanks for making time for us, Kourtney. I know you're super busy, and welcome to Dream Path Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
And I have light envy now. You're so well lit over there. I need to figure out a better lighting situation.
Can I tell you, this has been a lot of trial and error. The Disney publicity folks sent me over these 2 insane ring lights that I didn't understand how to operate. And there's been so many Zooms where people were like, can you fix your, and I was like, I'm not a DP. Like, I don't know how, and so after much trial and error, I just have a little light over the video camera and it makes a world of difference.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got to tinker with that. I've got this giant light, but it's a terrible light apparently compared to yours. So.
It's it's just this little light, it's night and day. I went a whole year in darkness doing Zooms. And so that's my new recommend to everyone is go on Amazon and get a $30 light for your, because it feels a little vain. There was something about buying a ring light that just didn't feel.
Yeah. Like you're doing selfies and it feels a little, self-absorbed. Yeah.
It felt off brand, but I think we should all, writers especially need to hear this, that we need to love ourselves enough to care about we should look our best on our Zooms. It's that simple. Yeah. It doesn't mean anything else. Just invest in yourself.
Right. Great. Great tip there. Kourtney, I am 8 episodes in to the season, and we're here to talk primarily about Doogie Kamealohas MD, but also your writing career. Tell us about this show and how you created the show or got involved in the creation of the show.
Yes. I worked on Fresh Off the Boat for a long time, and Melvin Marr and Jake Kasdan were executive producers on that show, along with Nanak Khan, who became a dear friend of mine. And that's one of the things I love about working on shows is you just sort of become lifelong friends with the folks there, or at least that's my hope, and that's what I most enjoy about it. And so Fresh Off the Boat ended, and Melvin Marr was talking to 20th and thinking about the properties that they had. There's this real push for studios and networks to look at existing IP. How can we reinvent this? Those conversations. And Melvin had the idea of doing a Doogie Howser reboot centered on an Asian girl. And Melvin and I go way back. And so he called me and he was like, "What do you think?" And I was like, "It's great. It's a great idea." And then I was like, "But like, how are you doing this? Like, why is it called Doogie? Like, is Neil Patrick Harris involved? Is it like he's the dad, or it's like the same hospital and he runs it? Like, how are you building that connective tissue to support this?" And he's a total producer. And he was like, "Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, there's stuff to figure out." I was like, "Yeah, there's a lot to figure out." And he's like, "Do you want to do it? Come on, it'll be great." And I was like, "There's so many reboots." And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, "Everybody at the studio and network is really high on this." And to me, it was a little bit like, but why? Like, you can reboot anything, but, why is it sort of worth not only the audience investing, but selfishly, me investing in this?
Right.
And, but I did think it was a really good idea. And so it was sort of percolating in the back of my head. And one day I had the idea that, all these reboots are always set in the world of the existing show or movie or whatever it is. But I was like, what if you did a reboot that was set in our real world, where Doogie Howser is just a show in the 90s that we all know exists? Like the characters are sort of operating from our framework, and it's just a nickname. And she hates it. She's like, "It has nothing to do with me. Like, I wasn't even born during that time." And then if it's a nickname, you're just sort of off to the races, and you're not saddled with all that exposition that I think is sometimes really tricky in these reboots. And I sort of like the tongue-in-cheekness of it. That's just like, "Oh yeah, she's a Doogie." And like, we go along, we used to joke in the writer's room sometimes as we got deeper into the season. Somebody, like a writer, would be like, "Have we called her Doogie in a while?" We're like, "Oh shoot, we should go back. Somebody should call her Doogie so we can like keep that idea going." And so I thought that was a really fun way to approach it, but I still wasn't totally convinced. And it's because I kept passing on it. I kept saying pass. Like, I don't like, I wanted, there's other things I'm working on that, seem a little more interesting to me right now. And so I called my friend Melvin and I was like, "I have an idea for you. Like, I don't want to do it, but here's my idea that I think would make this work. Like, take this and go get a writer. And I think it would be great." And he was like, "I'm not going to get a writer. Like, it's your idea." And I was like, I don't know. And then I had the thought, you could set it in Hawaii. And that's when I got really excited because, I was born in Hawaii. My dad's from there. My family's all there. And the thing that got me really excited is Hawaii is such a Asian, Native Hawaiian friendly place. And it would enable you to populate the show with those folks in such an organic way. And everybody goes through Hawaii, that it just opened. There's so much rich diversity. And I got really excited about doing a show about a family that just lives in Hawaii. Like, this is just how it is. And so once that became part of it, I got really excited by it. And it also sort of felt special and personal to me because it was my family. And so it sort of was the thing that was like, okay, now I want to do this. Like, now I'm invested in this. I see an opportunity here. And so, that's sort of how it started.
So what I love about this show is that it has this reference back to Doogie Howser, which makes it kind of nostalgic. So it has the reboot aspect of it, but in a good way. There's a lot of really bad reboots out there. But what it also does is it like a really good family-friendly sitcom does. It has humor for young people, but it also has these pop culture references from the 80s and 90s that allows the adults to feel like they're in on the joke too. And it's like it's the perfect mix of age appropriate humor for the entire family. And also, I've read a lot of interviews going into this with you, because I don't want to have you repeat yourself too much. But the personal aspect of this is remarkable, because my view of Disney and big networks like ABC are my view is that it is so corporatized that it's almost impossible to put a personal touch on a show. Like, there would never be one person who is calling the shots to say, you know what, this is going to look like my family. And it's going to be in Hawaii because that's where I grew up and that's where my family is. And there's going to be a middle sister, and she's the protagonist. And then there's an older brother and little brother, just like my family. And, the mother's going to be white, just like my mother. And so you have this makeup that is very personal to you, and these personal touches that you've put in the show, like watching the octopus in the washing machine, that type of thing. So tell us about the logistics of being able to pull that off at such a huge network when you're not the president of the network.
Yes. That's a great question. And I can tell you've done a lot of research on the show. So thank you. I appreciate that. It's funny. You sort of tapped on one thing. Jake Kasdan, who directed, he did New Girl and he directed the Jumanji movies. He directed the pilot. And he used to always say, and it always used to make me laugh, because he used to always say, for a Doogie Howser reboot, this show is so personal. Like, you wouldn't think a Doogie Howser reboot would be based so much on one person's life, like you were saying. And so we would laugh about it. I think I'm very lucky in that they got excited about those personal touches, and it was never a fight and it was never a battle. I think they smartly wanted the show to be respectful and feel personal. And they really did give me and the whole team free reign. We got to go to Hawaii. We got to go to all these places. There were things that, they would sometimes question. And then once we sort of stated why it was important to us or what it meant, they would go, okay, great. And, sometimes making shows not all about white people leads you to sometimes tricky and difficult conversations. But they're conversations that you should have. And my hope is that those difficult conversations never stop these kinds of shows from being made, because it's good. It's good to have these conversations, and you're not always going to get everything right, but it's all about being respectful and being as true as you can to the story you're telling. And so we were very lucky in that they were like, great, go ahead, make it your own. And it's one of the things the network most loves about the show, which I think is really encouraging. And I think for writers, the takeaway too is there's so much IP out there, and it can seem a little bit like a little daunting almost, because, 20 years ago when I first, started doing this, I used to go in and pitch a show, and it would be, this is me and my best friend, this is me and my family. And it was like, great. And either you got to shoot the pilot or you didn't, but you didn't need IP and the director who just did Jumanji to make stuff happen. I love Jake, and I'm happy that I have him in my arsenal of friends to help make stuff happen. But back in the day, it was very different. And so I think the trick as writers is to figure out how to work within that system. Like, Doogie, I think, is a great example of, something that at first didn't really feel like anything personal or a story I was interested in telling. And slowly I began to see a way of how I could make it my own. And so it's, and I think as writers, it kind of presents an interesting challenge, to sort of take the constrictions of this is a thing, and how do you tell your story? How do you infuse what you want to say into this thing, because at the end of the day, IP or these reboots or titles, it just makes everyone you're pitching to more comfortable. And you're starting from a place that people get it. That was one of the interesting things I learned too doing this, is that there is an ease to it that there isn't when you're self-generating your own idea. Like when you come in with your own idea, you're starting from scratch and trying to build the tone, the world, the characters. This is the thing. When I went in to pitch this reboot, it's like, so, Doogie Howser, there's like a whole series that people are already starting from.
Right.
And so, it's an interesting challenge.
Yeah. Thinking about this logistically, that makes total sense that you would need that tether to something that they understand. And the tether is Doogie, you're rebooting Doogie. And then over time, to make it special, to make it have some long lasting power, you have to have a personal touch to it, because otherwise it's just a gimmick.
100%, 100%. And I think, had I gone in trying to pitch a show that was like, it's based on it's a family show, it's based on my family, and it's set in Hawaii.
Right.
I think people would have been like, oh, that's interesting. But like there wouldn't be enough of a hook, or there wouldn't be enough pressure on them to say yes.
Yeah.
And I think, it's a Doogie Howser reboot here, but here's what's cool about it. It's in Hawaii and it's based on her family. So it's going to be personal.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly, like, you see how, I'm not saying it's right, but I think you see how the ball starts rolling.
You have to dangle the shiny object in front of the producer, the studio executive, to hook them, to at least give them an idea of how this is going to play and how it's going to connect with people nostalgically or whatever. But you did it's a brilliant series from the standpoint that you have a nice mix of comedy and dramatic situations, but you also culturally, for instance, Talking Story, I think it was episode 8, where you have Dr. Clara, is that her name? The mother?
Mm-hmm, Clara, yes. Clara and Benny.
So Clara and Benny are talking about how Clara can really connect with people. And the way she needs to do that is to basically be present and be mindful in a way that the Native Islanders, Native Hawaiians know how to do. And how do they do that? Through Talking Story. That's just it's a cool lesson that you are able to cram into a 30-minute sitcom and do it so brilliantly. So how do you, as the showrunner or show creator, work on those storylines? Is it that they're presented to you by the writers in the writers' room and that you're just sort of approving them? Are you creating these ideas? Tell us about the logistics of working with the writers' room and coming up with themes like that in a show like this.
Yes. I lucked out in that I hired the most amazing writing staff ever. And we all like completely love each other and had the best time possible. And we did it all on Zoom. Like months after it ended, we all got together and like saw each other for the first time. It was so funny. Like we used to have conversations like, how tall do you think everyone is? Like, I'm tiny. I'm barely 5'2" in real life. And some people were like, no way. I thought you were like 5'4" or 5'5". And I was like, oh my gosh, thanks. Like, because we just had never seen each other in person. And so it was a very odd experience. But what we did was we sort of started, from a sort of overall place of talking about each character, like a lot about each character in the beginning. And then we talked a lot about like, what's the sort of arc of the season, like where they sort of start emotionally and where they're going to go. And it's interesting because when you're running a room, the tendency is to want to just like throw shit on a board. Like, let's break a story. Let's see what this is going to be. But I do think there's real value in taking the time we took like a solid 2 weeks of talking about like the people specifically, like, just like broad stroke stuff. And it's funny because it's longer than the time I wanted to spend doing it. My dear friend, Matt Kuhn, who was like my number 2 on the show, who I worked with on How I Met Your Mother and Fresh Off the Boat. We've been working together for a really long time. He is a big believer in that. And I started to feel the pinch of like, we start shooting in like 8 weeks. Like we got to just break a story. We got to go. But we kept coming up with really interesting stuff that you just sort of have to have faith is going to pay off down the line.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, like, after those 2 weeks, we had so many episode ideas and we sort of had a sense of like the emotional arc of where the characters were going. And the writers all said that when they went off to write their drafts, because when you're a writer on staff, you break the story, you go off, you are tasked with writing a script in the voice of these characters. And in our case, this was like a runaway train. We, based off the script, we got picked up to do 10 episodes. So as we were breaking all the stories for the episodes, we were also casting the leads and prepping the pilot. So they didn't have the benefit of watching a pilot or seeing like we were just sort of going.
Right.
And a few folks said that like that time in the beginning was so valuable for when they went off on script because it felt like it informed who the characters were, what kind of jokes they would do. And so it's a combination, we all started together. If I could, I would be all day in the room every day. I love the room. And I think that story breaking and the script is the most important piece of the process. That like once you like they could stand in a different way, the shirt could be a different shirt, like production is also very important. But if that script isn't rock solid, like if each scene you don't get what the idea is, the whole thing is a problem. And so I feel like that story breaking and the script is the best thing you can do to ensure success down the line. Because even if you have a great script, there's a multiple of ways that you could execute it that would all still be great. But if you have a not great script and a not great scene, chances are it's not going to work. So I sort of like to put my eggs in that early forming basket. And so, yeah, we would do it together. But then, I left to go to Hawaii to shoot the pilot, and the room that I put together was fantastic. And they were able to keep it going, and stories got broken without me. And then I would check in, and talk about things, and then we'd meet up. And one thing I learned is that on Zoom, rewriting on Zoom was difficult. And I didn't enjoy it, to be honest. Like I like rewriting in a room. It's so much more fun and engaging, like everybody in the boxes. And so what I ended up doing was having writers do multiple drafts of their scripts. Like, so I would read a script, give a bunch of notes, give it to the writer, do it again, until the point where it was really just like punching jokes and stuff. And then we'd bring it back into the room. And what ended up happening as a result is each script is so much the original writer's work, which doesn't always happen on TV shows because of the room writing process. And so it's really great because the episodes they all feel of a piece, but they all have like a little special extra sauce in them. And it's totally the writer. And I think as the writers on staff appreciate it because so much of what ends up on TV is their work. It's all them. Like you can feel it. And so I think it makes them more invested in the show. And the short answer is just get amazing writers. That's the best way to do it.
I would assume that the diversity in your writer's room is not only just ethnic diversity, but age diversity, because I'm seeing some age-related themes in the show with Benny, being in the senior circuit for surfing, and then you've got Kai and his issues with being a teenager, and then little Brian and his his venture capital spirit that he has to start a business. But you've got this wide variety of perspectives in the characters that I would think require, or at least it would be ideal to have, older folks in the writer's room, younger folks. What does that look like?
We do. We have, and it's so funny because I am now the older folk. Like I remember when, like it's always crazy to me. Like I remember being like, I'm the single girl on staff, and now it's
Right.
like I'm the mom of three. you know? But yes, we have our staff. We have more women than men, I believe. We have a lot of Asian folks on staff, and we have a wide range. You're right. There's myself. And there's this other lovely writer named Steve Joe, who's an Asian guy. And we laugh because we've both been in this business for like 20 years and have never worked together except for on this show. And our bit is that every staff, like before this, like once you get an Asian person, like you wouldn't hire a second Asian person. Like that would be
That's all
like
you've
that
done
would
your
be
work.
yeah, like that the once the quota was filled by either one of us, that like it never. And it's so funny, we have like every single of our friends in common because we've worked on shows and been around, and so it's very funny. But yes, we're the seasoned vets, as it were. And then our one of our staff writers literally was finishing her last semester at Harvard while also working
Wow.
on our show. And so
Amazing.
she was, much younger. But it would be so funny. Like we would ask them about, how, the hip things, as it were. And it's all,
Hmm.
my 13-year-old daughter was also our, pseudo teenage consultant.
Okay.
So we would like ask her things and she would like, it was funny. Like one time we were like trying to like pump her for stuff and she was like, Mom, that's so cringe. And we were like, oh, cringe, that's great. Like putting it in.
Did she get any writing credits on that?
I know she should. She should.
That's funny. Yeah, the show is so beautiful too because it's shot in Oahu, right?
Yes.
But are the studio scenes also shot there? Do you have a studio
Yes.
set up? Okay.
Yes. Our line producer, Justin McEwen, he is a genius warrior of the highest regard at the height of the pandemic and flew out to Hawaii and worked with our locations department there. Amira, who's phenomenal. Like every location is more breathtaking than the next. And they figured out where we shot. It's crazy. It's called John Burns Medical Center. It's an actual it's like a teaching hospital, but they were in the midst of doing some construction. And so there were 3 floors that were empty.
Mm.
And we built a hospital set inside a hospital. So it's like the coolest thing, like, because there's all those pretty exteriors there's like hallways and the oceans behind them. That's all real. And then they built our hospital sets inside this So we would use the like real exterior and the hallways. And then and they put together this amazing thing. And then one of the floors had Lahella's bedroom. So that was also in the real hospital set.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the Kamealoha house, which is out in Waimanalo, which was a real house that it was really hard to find the house because I was hell bent on finding a 2-story house on the beach because Steph, the best friend, from the original, Vinny would climb through Doogie's window.
Right.
And I was like, she's such a good friend. It has to be a 2nd-story window. Like it says everything you need to know about their friend. Like if it's a 1st-story window, it just isn't.
Yeah.
Like it.
That makes total sense now. Yeah.
Yes. I was like hell bent on this. And everybody was like, you're not going to know. Like she's just climbing in the window. We're not, I'm like, trust me, it has to be, it's a subconscious thing. Like I felt so strongly about this. And I wanted a house on the beach. And like I had my list of things.
No big deal. Just a $20 million house. I mean, yeah.
I mean, yeah. But it can't, because then they would find these gorgeous beach houses. I'm like, that's so fancy. Like I wanted it to feel cozy and homey. Right. And they nailed it. They found this amazing house with this amazing backyard that was like right on the beach that it was, we were very lucky.
Yeah. So 5 months in Hawaii. Did you take your daughters with you?
I didn't. So we were supposed to shoot in the summer, which was my hope. And then it was like, oh, Hawaii has low cases. the family will go, everybody's zooming it, like the kids will be out of school, everybody's zooming anyway. And then things sort of took longer to all happen. And we ended up shooting January of 2021, or no, February 1st, we started shooting. We were there prepping in January. And it was right when they decided to let my kids' school like opened a few hours a week. And so they were able to go. And we were so excited to finally have them able to go to school. And so I ended up going on my own. And my husband, who's also a writer, he works on American Dad, the animated show now on TBS. He stayed back with our 3 daughters who were doing on like school Zoom while he was also on American Dad, like running a room while like this was happening. And I ended up being gone for 45 days. It was not the best. And because of COVID, like I couldn't fly back and forth because it was like, this was before anybody was vaccinated. It was like, oh, well, if you travel, you should quarantine. Like it was really challenging, but we got through it.
So I saw some credits, some Bochco credits, but it wasn't Stephen Bochco. There were other Bochcos involved. So tell me about how that family got involved with this project. There
are. So Dana Bochco, who is married to Stephen and who worked with him and like ran his company, and Jesse Bochco, Stephen's son, they're executive producers on the show, and they're kind of trustees of his material. And Jesse tells a really beautiful story that, Stephen passed away. And before that, he was saying to Jesse, like, these are all yours. Like, I want you to take these, figure out what to do. Like
these meaning shows.
Yeah. Meaning the shows, meaning, what he had built. And, he's like, nothing would make me happier than, figure this out. He sort of, almost gifted it to them. And so they took that very seriously. And, they were executive producers on the show, and they couldn't have been more lovely. And as soon as they heard like Hawaii and I started talking about my family, they were like, go, go, go. We love it. Whatever you want to do, like make this your own. They were so tremendously supportive. And then Jesse directed 2 episodes as well. And it was really great because he directed episode 4 where Walter needs the appendectomy. And it's one of our first like hospital, like crazy ER. There's a bus crash, and she's running with the gurney. And he came more from the world of directing drama. So he did a bunch of Grey's Anatomy and those kinds of shows. And it was great because he really helped set the template of that like medical procedure, the ER is bustling feel of the show. Yeah. And so we're so lucky we had him come aboard, and those guys have been awesome.
So, yeah. And I like seeing that in the credits, the paying homage to, David Kelly and Bochco. And it really, I mean, for people in our generation, it's kind of cool to see that the legacy that those guys have, with shows like this. And it's not just Doogie, but just an amazing catalog of entertainment. I'm wondering, because you have so much experience with sitcoms, and I don't know if is it called multi-camera sitcoms, or is that the way you describe them?
Yeah, I mean, How I Met Your Mother was a multi-cam, and then Fresh Off the Boat was a single cam. So
okay, all right. So you have so much street cred when it comes to sitcoms. Fresh Off the Boat and How I Met Your Mother. I mean, 180 some episodes of How I Met Your Mother. So you have this in your DNA in terms of the formula of how to tell a story in a very compressed amount of time, and to give each character the exact right amount of story and screen time. I mean, it's really cool to study the craft from that lens. But I'm wondering, as a writer, what you like about the constraints of that approach, that paradigm, and what is, kind of maybe annoying or something that you would like to change over time. Or is it possible to change that formula? Maybe it's just part of how audiences consume this type of entertainment?
Yeah. I think one thing that makes that form, as you say, very challenging is the time constraints. When you work on a network show, there's a delivery time that you have to hit every time. So it's like 21 minutes and 32 seconds or 22 seconds or whatever, or sometimes it's like, oh, we have a bachelor special. You only get 19 minutes and, whatever,
Right.
whatever it is, but you have a set delivery time and you have to fit your episode into that time, no matter what. And one of the really amazing things about working at Disney Plus is there isn't a time restriction. There's we want our episodes to be about a half hour, 27 minutes. You know what I mean? Like there's a target.
Yeah.
But what ends up happening is your episode gets to be as long as your story needs it to be.
Nice.
And so we have episodes that are like 26 minutes. We have episodes that are 35 minutes. Like our show ends up being a wide span in what these episode lengths are. And I think one of the reasons why folks are so gravitating towards streaming and towards more shows like that aren't so constricted by time is they feel fresher and they feel more honest, because what inevitably ends up happening is not every story needs 21 minutes and 32 seconds. Some might need 28, some might be done by 18, but now you're like padding stuff into it. And so, I feel like network TV gets a bum rap sometimes, and folks are rightly sort of like, oh, I've seen this. It feels stale. It's not speaking to an audience. But I think the constraints that are put on the folks who are making those shows are so much greater than they are on folks who are making shows for Apple or HBO Max or, whoever it is. Like, their music budgets are bigger. They can say things like Starbucks or Pop-Tart, and they aren't like, or like Toyota, or whatever it may be. And when you work at a network, there's all these, your hands are tied behind your back a little bit.
Yeah. I remember the first episode, I think it was the first or second, where they were playing Creedence Clearwater Revival, quite a bit of the song. And I was thinking, how did they do that? Oh, it's Disney. Of course. That's how they do it. They're able to, buy the rights to really cool music and make the show special that way. But yeah, I would guess that having that discipline that you have from Fresh Off the Boat, and probably more so with How I Met Your Mother, which, network and extremely tied to the clock, it's easier to go from that paradigm to a little more loose paradigm where you can have the story guide you for how long it needs to be, as opposed to the reverse. So
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I know the writers used to joke. Sometimes they were like, how many pages do you want our scripts to come in at? I was like, 20, 30, 32, 31, 29. And he used to drive my friend Matt Kuhn, who I do the show with, crazy, because he is very like analytical. And, I'm like, however long this story needs.
Right.
And he's like, let's say 31. Can we just say 31 pages? Feels right. I'm like, okay, we'll say 31.
So tell us about your Carnegie Mellon roots and University of Pittsburgh and how important that was in your formation as a writer.
It was very important. I love TV and movies, musicals from the time I was this big. I did musical theater, all that stuff. And I thought I wanted to be an actress because I think as a kid, that's what you see. And I'm not a great actress and I'm not a great singer. And I took dance, like I'm not a great dancer. And I was like, I was smart enough to get that, like, I wasn't going to break through. And it was like devastating. Like I was never going to get to be a part of this thing I wanted to be a part of. And it wasn't until it was literally my last class at University of Pittsburgh. I took a playwriting class because it was the only one that would like fit in with my schedule. And when I heard playwriting, like I just thought of like Shakespeare, like it felt like something that like didn't apply to me somehow. And I took the class and like changed my life. I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. Cause I've always liked writing, but like poetry wasn't like journaling. Like I couldn't find the right form of writing for me. And so when I took this class, I was like, oh my God, like this is my life. Like this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And then I graduated. And so I was like, I'm going to move to LA and I'm going to work in TV and movies. It'll be great. And I have what I call my false start. So I moved out to LA and I became a cocktail waitress. And I worked in Malibu and couldn't figure out, like, would drive by the Fox lot and was like, hi guys, like, I want to work there. I have no idea how to do it. But and the playwriting teacher I had at Pitt suggested I apply to graduate schools. And I ended up applying to Carnegie Mellon. And I got a partial scholarship to go there. And I decided to do it. I really had hoped to stay in LA. I applied to UCLA. Like I really wanted to get into UCLA and because then I could stay in LA. Like I sort of felt like a little bit like a failure that like I came to LA and now I have to go back to Pittsburgh. And but it made the most sense for me to do that. And so that's what I did. And so I went to Carnegie Mellon. It was the most amazing experience. I learned so much. And they really help you sort of connect the dots of not only like the craft of writing and this is how you do it, but to then just be smart about once you get out here, which is basically they're like, get whatever job you can is their advice. Like,
so they're actually they're actually not just teaching you, academics, but the practical aspect of working in the industry.
They do. They do a really good job of, trying to set you up for that. There's a week that they do in May where you come out to LA for like, I think it's like 4 or 5 days and they set up a bunch of meetings for you. Like we talk to like movie executives talk to you, an agent came to talk to us. Like they do these, Aaron Sorkin talked to us. Like
what?
we do all, yes, it was crazy. But there is a weird thing sometimes about Carnegie Mellon. Like they would like bring directors in and like the advice they would give you is like, look, never let the studio change your final cut of a movie. And like, we're all like, where should I live?
Right.
I mean, like, how do I get a job as a PA?
Right.
Like, and so there's this very like high-low kind of, I think Aaron Sorkin was like, dialogue is everything. And you're like, oh, okay, like, will you hire me as something? But yeah, so they were very helpful. And then when I came back out here, I got a job as an assistant and sort of did that route and worked my way up the food chain and, got people coffee and did all those things. And here I am.
Yeah, very conventional route. I mean, Carnegie Mellon is not conventional. I don't really talk to a lot of people who go through Carnegie Mellon, but amazing school from what I have read. But in terms of your path through the industry to where you are now, it sounds like you have like a grassroots, very conventional, starting from the bottom and just working your way up. A lot of hard work, a lot of low-level producing, mid-level producing, and then becoming a showrunner on a Disney Plus show. What an amazing journey.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, one of the weird things, the thing that really got me my first job, when I started out here, I wanted to be a writer. And then I worked on a sitcom called Daddy-O, which was Michael Chiklis is like a Mr. Mom, like he's going to stay home with the kids. Okay. And they call that a Daddy-O. And so like every other scene, they were trying to be like the mailman would open the door and he'd be there and he'd like, where are you? It's noon. What's a man doing home? And he's like, I'm a Daddy-O. Like that was sort of the like gist of it in the early, like it was like the idea was insane that like a man was home taking care of the children
how times have changed.
Yes, that was sort of the gist of the sitcom. And as I was working there, one of my jobs became trying to like, it was on a lot, like parking spots sometimes on a lot are like tricky. And so it was my job to like help guard the parking spots for like like the show had been pulled from the air and we were making the shows and they weren't airing them. So it's kind of like dark times at that point. And so like the studio and network comes in and it's like, this is like our lifeline to, seeing the light of day. And so like, let's make sure they have parking spots. So they send me out there like, and I remember standing there and looking at like an orange cone because people would pull up and be like, move. And I'd be like, no, I'm kind of saving this. And I remember like looking at an orange cone and being like, you're better at this job than I am. Like you're doing this more efficiently than me. But the studio and network would come. And this is like the early 2000s. And they had like 7 jeans and like high heels and like Louis Vuitton bags. And they all had like this like perfectly like straight flat ironed hair. And they were like, we just came from Katsuya. Like I love sushi. And I was like, who are these like glamour girls that like I'm standing in cargo shorts, like saving parking spots for? And they were like, oh, that's the studio and network. And then like we would do a run through and then these girls would give notes and they'd be like, I didn't like this moment. This isn't funny, like blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and they'd like say it to the writers who were all sort of like, haven't seen daylight in like a week and we're like snacking. And I was like, oh, I don't want to be a writer. Like I want to be an executive. Like this is what I need to be doing. And so I started to pursue that and I became an executive. So I was an executive in comedy development at NBC.
Wow.
And I got there and like a month in, I was like, oh, I've made a terrible mistake.
You felt your soul dying slowly.
Yes. I was like, oh no, this, this is not what I want to do. But the funny thing is I've made all these great relationships with like the studio and the network. And when I wanted to make the shift, that's what helped me get the job, is that the people at the studio and the network were like, you should hire this girl. And so that was, so it was a sort of traditional path. And then, so my new advice, I suppose, is become a network executive and then get those people to push you onto a show.
Wow, that's a pretty unique path. I've never heard of going to becoming the executive and then leaving that space to be more creative within the writer's
I think
room.
The only reason I was able to do it is that I was there for such a short period of time that I hadn't pissed off anybody. Like nobody knew who I was. Like I was the person in the meeting that didn't say anything. So like, I think if you were there long enough, he would be like, oh no, I don't, like there would be some baggage connected with me and there just wasn't because nobody had any idea who I was.
I follow a lot of writers on Twitter and television writers specifically. And it seems like the culture has changed, the work culture, corporate culture, in terms of what is demanded or expected of writers, or at least what the writers are expecting of the experience. And what I mean is, my view of how writers were treated back in the 80s, 90s, and probably 2000s is that it was like, okay, you're in this room and, it doesn't matter if it's a 12-hour day or a 14-hour day or whatever, you're going to crank out this number of pages and this number of, jokes, and we're going to get this thing done. And I think it was perceived as kind of abusive toward, writing staff. Has that changed in terms of the work ethics that is expected of young writers coming into a writer's room, where there's more acknowledgement of, work-life balance, that type of thing? Or is it still a grind?
I think there has been a shift. I think there really has been a shift. For me, I'm a mom, like I got 3 kids. And so I just want to work efficiently and I want to like get in there. I want to get my work done and I want to go home. Like, I don't want to sit and watch like an hour of YouTube clips and like do bits about it. I mean, that's fun, but also, it's like, let's get home. And so I think it has changed. I honestly think too, there's more women showrunners now. And I think women especially are like looking to be efficient and get home. There's like an old thing, like never work on a show where the showrunner is getting divorced because the hours will be really brutal.
I can see that.
because they don't want to
Yeah.
go home. Do you
Right.
know what
Yeah.
I mean?
They don't
Like
want
you
to
just,
have that confrontation.
they
Yeah.
don't like, they just stay. And so, yeah, I think it has changed. I think there is still a mentality. I know Friends is a great example of, um, they had crazy hours and it would be like they were there till 2 a.m. Like, is this the funniest joke that this moment could possibly have?
Yeah.
And I think there's a certain street cred that built, or that, and I think it was something people sort of admired,
Mm.
and what was also really cool was like they were making friends. Like it was a great show and you saw it like it was amazing. And after Friends, there were shows that were also there till 2, 3 in the morning that weren't Friends,
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I don't know that those hours is maybe in that situation, those hours is what made that show great. I don't know, but I think just because you're putting in those hours, sometimes there's diminishing returns as well. Like I think there's a way to work smart and be prepared. And, I'm a big like I have like a gazillion calendars and deadlines. Like this story is going to be broken by this date. This script's going to be done by this date. Like these are the markers we're hitting. And so there's never, it just depends. It just depends who's running the show. Somebody said, I don't know who it is. I think it was like a Big Bang writer. This isn't mine, so I don't want to take credit for it, but I love it, which is basically when you're a writer in TV, you go through the development process, you write a really good script, and then somebody, if your script is so good, someone might say to you, okay, great. Now here, run the 7-Eleven, which I think like speaks to, it's two different jobs. Like you can be a great writer, but then you have to run a show, which is a
Right.
whole other animal,
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, my perception of just the workplace culture in general, not just writers' rooms, but just everywhere, people are wanting to work smarter. Like if they can get 8 hours worth of work done in 6 hours, why do I want to, put on a show here that I'm actually still working for 2 extra hours? Or,
Totally.
I think that's one of the great things about the younger generation is that they're changing the way older folks are, have to view work ethic and what does it really mean to be a hard worker or a good worker or an efficient worker.
A
But
hundred percent. I think there's just like they're being smart about it, and there's less they'll put up with. A friend of mine who's a writer, we were talking about like the Me Too movement, and she was cracking me up because she was like, "I'm so proud of them." She's like, "It would never occur to me to be like, no, you can't treat me like that." Like it would just like good for them. She's like, "What this generation is amazing."
yeah,
And it was sort of dark humor, but we were laughing about it. But I think you're right that it's, why are we, just because this is how things were doesn't mean it's how they should be. And
right.
so I think like having those conversations is good. And I think now people want to be on shows that just like work efficiently. It's a good show, and as you're a writer, your priorities change, when I was younger, like it was all about like the cool show and I want to be on, whatever. And then as you get older, it's like, I want to work on a show with nice people, with good hours that like enables me to like have time with my family.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
Quality of life. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So 9 episodes are up on
Yes.
Doogie Kamealohas MD. And it's a 10 episode season.
Yes.
Okay. So we have the final episode coming up. When do you find out about season 2, whether it gets picked up?
Great question. We're hearing really good things, and it seems like all things are moving that way. Unclear, but we're hopeful that the network has been so supportive. Our reviews have been really good. It's one of the weird things about working in streaming is like the lack of ratings. Like I'm like 1,000 years old that like I wake up and you're like, how did the show do? And you
Right.
like go to your ratings and see, and it affects the whole day. You talk about them, around the water cooler. And so it's been oddly nice, but weird to, the show airs and then we just go about our lives. And
Just cross your fingers and edge of your seat.
Yes. But the good news is that everybody at the network has been so supportive and they love the show. And I know that they're really excited that the reviews have been so good, especially I think we were all pleasantly surprised at how well the show was reviewed, given it's a reboot, given it's on Disney Plus. I think sometimes people can, you never know. And so it was reviewed pretty favorably. And so I think everyone's hopeful, but I mean, you never know.
Yeah, that has to be so suspenseful as you put all this effort into it. You're living over in Oahu and you've created this family of people, the writer's room, and then you're all just waiting, waiting for the word to come down from above. And I've heard that the data is difficult to find. Like even the folks that have shows on Netflix, like they don't know. Like Netflix won't even tell them what the ratings are, or what the downloads are.
It's I think they sort of share what they want to share, and it's a weird time.
Well, Kourtney Kang, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, and good luck with season 2. I hope it gets picked up, and I can't wait to see the rest of the season. I'm on episode 9. I'll be watching that tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me. This was a delight.
Hey, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, I have a favor to ask. Can you go to wherever you listen to podcasts and leave me a review? Your feedback is what keeps this podcast going. You can also check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook with the handle @DreamPathPod. And as always, go find your dream path.